Hey, happy Tuesday morning to you, everyone, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and it's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for joining me. Okay, want to get right back into it. We are continuing our discussion of Sukkot, okay, which is the seventh of Israel's feast days. We've been trying to explore its typological meaning, the meaning, the significance that was attached to it by the Jews down throughout the centuries. Oh, pardon me. And yesterday I introduced the idea, and I discuss it in my book, that the Feast of Sukkot, all down through the centuries, was related to the dedication of the temple of God. And pardon me. And the meaning of Sukkot was that it was at the time of harvest. The time of harvest, that was the time of the greatest joy in the nation in the entirety of the year. The crops have been gathered in. It is a time of abundance. It is a time of thanksgiving. It is a time of praise and worship. So all of those ideas, all of those concepts were part of the matrix, if you please, surrounding the temple itself. So every observance of Sukkot, and the observance of Sukkot was quite an elaborate, we're going to get into that, but it was quite an elaborate ceremonial and ordinance, if you please, that had to do with the sounding of trumpets, the walking around the altar, and the pouring of water, and on and on and on it goes. It must have been quite impressive to be part of that crowd of 250,000 people, which is how many the temple could hold. But to return to the point, and that is that we are told that Solomon dedicated the temple at the Feast of Sukkot. Part of what was involved in that dedication, as I pointed out yesterday, was pointed out and described in 1 Kings chapter 8. That's when the Ark of the Covenant was brought into the temple, taken into the most holy place, with the poles that carried it that were so long that they actually stuck out through the curtain into the holy place. According to the description of 1 Kings chapter 8. That's pretty impressive. I don't know what kind of poles they had. I know they were probably acacia wood, but boy, they were really, really long. Anyway, so we have the bringing of the Ark of the Covenant into the temple of God on the day of the dedication of the temple. So what does that mean? It symbolized that the presence of God was being established. It was being glorified, if I may use that term. We come then to the New Testament, and we are told repeatedly in the New Testament that first century temple, the old covenant temple, was going to be destroyed. In Matthew chapter 24, as Jesus and his apostles walk out of the temple, they're showing him the beauty of the stones. He had just said in chapter 23, speaking to the Jews in the temple, your house, that's this house, is left unto you desolate. They knew what that meant. That meant that temple, that first century Jerusalem temple, was going to come down. The apostles were stunned. They knew that prophetically that had been predicted. They didn't realize it was going to be in their generation. But Jesus said so. Matthew 23:37. So they're showing Jesus the magnificent beauty and the size of those stones. Did you know that for many years, until later discoveries, did you know that the architectural foundation stones the temple at Jerusalem were considered the largest architectural stones that had ever been used? Now, they found others since then that are larger. that doesn't detract from the incredible size of those foundation stones. So Jesus' apostles begin to point out the size, the beauty, the glory of the temple. And Jesus says, do you not see all of these things? The time is coming in which not one stone shall be left standing on top of another. By the way, he wasn't talking about the temple itself, or excuse me, the city itself. He was talking about the temple itself. So here is Jesus unequivocally, absolutely predicting that temple was going to be destroyed in that generation. And we know it absolutely was fulfilled. Following up on that, Jesus nonetheless predicted he was going to establish his temple. Now, if the Old Covenant temple, even though the Ark of the Covenant wasn't in there in the first century, it was destroyed in 586 BC, never to be built again. So, if and since Jesus predicted the destruction of the first century temple, that meant that that old covenant system, symbolized by the Ark of the Covenant. And by the way, let me make this little sidebar here. I've had people tell me that according to Revelation 11, Revelation chapter 15, when John says, I saw the temple opened and I saw the Ark of the Covenant, I've had people tell me that, well, okay, what that means is the literal physical Ark of the Covenant was removed from earth and taken to heaven. I don't think that's true. So let me take just a moment here to address two issues. Point number one, do they actually know today, as we hear it said by many in the dispensational world, do we actually know where the Ark of the Covenant is? Now, I can assure you that it is not in Utah, as the Mormons affirm. But secondly, is it true that we do know, or that someone knows? You know, Ron Wyatt, an amateur archaeologist, claimed many years ago to have found a secret tunnel. He went under the Temple Mount, and there he found the Ark of the Covenant. Well, unfortunately, the pictures that he took were of real poor quality and actually showed pop rivets. Houston, we have a problem. Folks, they didn't have pop rivets when the Ark of the Covenant was built. Well, then Ron Wyatt said, well, okay, I'm going to, along with a rabbi, I'm going to reveal the Ark of the Covenant on a given date. They set the date, I think it was in some June of several years ago. The time came, time went, no Ark of the Covenant revealed. Ron Wyatt was asked, where's the Ark? And he said, well, in consultation with this Jewish rabbi, we determined that it was not God's time yet. We determined that it would cause international conflict, perhaps war. So we just thought it best not to reveal it. Well, you know, ladies and gentlemen, and look, Ron Wyatt did some really interesting stuff. But nonetheless, when he said, we determined that if we revealed it now, it might cause war. Wait a minute. Wouldn't the Ark of the Covenant win the war? I mean, after all, this was God's holy, powerful instrument. So why wait? Reveal this thing. But they didn't, and that completely died on the vine. Others have said, no, we know where it's at. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to consider very carefully Jeremiah chapter 3. I was reading this years ago, and it, you know, as passages do, and I hope you'll forgive the digression, but this is really important. It has to do with all of the modern day speculation about a restored temple, a restored Ark of the Covenant, all purified, sanctified by the ashes of a red heifer that we hear about constantly. All right? But we're told the Ark of the Covenant will be found, and they know where it's at. And it's going to be revealed at just the right time, and it's going to be put in the restored temple at Jerusalem. I hope you have your Bible. I hope that you will follow along. I don't want to take too much time on this, but do you remember Pal Talk? I was on there one night. Somebody invited me to come in. They said, we want you to come participate. So I did. And they were talking with the Jewish rabbi, and he was talking about the Ark of the Covenant, saying it's going to be restored just any time now. This Jewish rabbi was basically taking the dispensational view of eschatology. And I said, well, I beg to differ. The Bible says the ark was destroyed and will never be built again. And he says, you're crazy. The Bible nowhere teaches that. You're a Gentile. You don't understand the Tanakh. Why do you say that? And I said, well, let me read to you. Jeremiah chapter 3, 15 and following. Jeremiah 3, 15 and following. I read it to him. And he literally said, I have no more time for this conversation. I'm going to leave. Well, very shortly thereafter, another rabbi comes into the room, into the chat room on Pal Talk. And he said, I understand there's someone here saying that the Ark of the Covenant is never going to be retrieved. Waved my hand. That was me. I read the text, and this new rabbi who came into the room to specifically refute and confound this pagan Gentile Christian immediately said, I don't have time for this. I'm out of here. And I have used this to the same effect many times. So, Jeremiah 3, 15 and following. Now, this is in the time in which all 12 tribes would be restored. When is that? That's the kingdom, right? That's the Messianic kingdom. And God said, I'm going to restore all 12 tribes, and I will give them faithful shepherds to rule over them. And he says, I will give you shepherds after my own heart, who will feed you on knowledge and understanding. And it shall be in those days, when? Restoration of the 12 tribes. When you are multiplied and increased in the land, declares the Lord, they shall say no more, the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Wait a minute, what? In the days of the restoration of Israel, they will no longer say the ark of the covenant of the Lord. It shall not come to mind, nor shall they remember it, nor shall they miss it. Now watch. Nor shall it be made again. Okay, very quickly, running out of time. Point number one, the Ark of the Covenant would no longer be discussed in the same way it had been discussed before. Doesn't mean they would have no memory of it. But they're not going to talk about it like they once did. And let me illustrate that to you. It shall not come to mind, nor shall they remember it. Now, this is from the Hebrew word zakar. Zakar is a covenantal word. In other words, to put it like this, the Ark of the Covenant would no longer be remembered covenantally. It would lose its covenantal significance. It would lose its covenantal importance. That's just another way of saying the old covenant was going to pass away. Now notice what he closes with. It shall not be made, some translations say built, King James, New King James. Okay, listen, folks. If something was not going to be built again, that means it was going to be destroyed. Never to be built again. You know what that means? Well, as I said, some people want to argue that Revelation chapter 11, Revelation 15, when John saw the Ark of the Covenant in the temple, the naos, the most holy place of the temple, that means the literal physical ark had been taken to heaven. No. The literal physical ark, number one, physical things are not in heaven. Number two, the physical ark was not in the temple because it was destroyed, never to be built again. Now listen, folks, if the Ark of the Covenant is not in the temple, the physical temple, that's a major, major problem. If the Ark of the Covenant is not there, how is the covenant going to be sanctified through the sprinkling of the blood? You see, in old dispensational teaching of modern day, the temple, the ark, and the ashes of the red heifer all go together. They are inextricably bound up together. You can't have a temple without the ashes of a red heifer. And you can't have the Ark of the Covenant without the ashes of the red heifer. But wait a minute. If you've got the ashes of a red heifer actually purifying anything, that means the law of Moses is still in effect. And yet Hebrews chapter 8 says the old covenant was, in the first century, ready to vanish away. And Paul said, 2 Corinthians chapter 3, that the covenant written and engraven in stones was passing away, present active, when 2 Corinthians was written. The old covenant, ladies and gentlemen, passed away. And the Ark of the Covenant will never be built again. So what are we looking at in Revelation chapter 11 and verse 15? Revelation 11 and Revelation 15. We're talking about pure symbolism. We're not talking about anything physical. We're not talking about anything literal. We're looking at what the ark symbolized, and that was the presence of God. Hey, I'm out of time. I'll get back to that concept of the ark representing the presence of God and the dedication of the temple on the flip side. I'll see you there.